We cannot be out protesting for the death of our fellow Americans.
I love that Nicole Shanahan is sitting here in my home.
I was so happy to be
And
here.
you guys don't know this, but before we even started, you started to take off your shoes because you know about my thing.
I was instructed. I was like, you're not going to be able to wear those shoes. And I was like, I don't know what socks I have on. And everyone was
Sage to the
like, don't worry. You will get provided with socks.
We're not supposed to be put back in here. Good thing I recognize. Somebody by the name of RFK Jr. just had these on and put them back in the basket. Like, once you wear them, no one else wants to wear them, right? Oh my gosh, gross. So you can pick whatever.
I mean, there might be someone here who wants them.
Actually, I should auction those off, right?
Okay, I think I might take these.
We're gonna go neutral.
We're gonna go neutral.
Yes. So you know my reason behind this?
Why? What?
It's just, I always open up more and talk more and communicate more when I'm like, feeling warm and fuzzy and comfortable. Yes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I when I'm on my couch and watching a game or watching a movie,
yeah,
I don't sit there like all formal like this, you know?
I know. I'm like a cross leg.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
crisscross
Are you a
applesauce.
yogi?
I love yoga.
So there we go. Comfortable yoga position. Yes. I imagine yoga will be helpful over the next several months as you are, what the heck? You're on the campaign trail. Right?
Yes. It's been about a month. It's been really exciting.
There's so much I want to talk to you about, but maybe I'll just wing it and start there because I was thinking on the way over here today. Obviously, there's many conversations leading up to when you get the question popped, and I don't mean a marriage proposal. I mean, would you consider being my running mate for Vice President of the United States of America? Like, is there did that actually happen, a moment where that happened with you and RFK Jr.?
Yes. I mean, I had been such a fan of his campaign for quite a while, and I had been involved in, funding his campaign when he was running in the Democratic primary. I was really excited about that. I tend to support new candidates that are entering into the Democratic Party. I think it's really healthy for that party. And I was really hoping for, real primary this year. And when he decided that running as an independent was going to be a better option, because of some very real concerns. I mean, the DNC, for a while now, has had challenges with, I believe, infrastructure and operations and creating a even playing field. So at first, when he decided to go independent, I initially withdrew. I was like, you hear the stories about how independents over the years have really been spoilers in elections.
Right.
And so I, decided that I would withdraw but still, from my heart, support him and watch his campaign. By the end of January, it had become very apparent to me that there was a lot of support across the United States for him as an independent. And a lot of them were like silent supporters. Like, they weren't going out and advertising. They weren't posting on their social media.
Right.
And so that was a real indicator to me that there was something else going on. And then there was a Super Bowl ad. And I had only spoken to Bobby personally a few times before that. And no, I had zero idea in my mind that I would ever be asked to run as his running mate. I mean, not once did that ever cross my mind, all the way up until about a month and a half ago when it did over dinner. And maybe it's almost 2 months ago now. But it was very much this moment of, I had been following him and supporting him. I understood his policies. We were able to have open conversation. And it was a real dialogue. There was no party, there was no angling, there was nothing, It was very much, it feels honestly, Sage, like how democracy is supposed to feel. Like something of individual agency and sovereignty and moving forward with values. And so we were over at dinner, and it was during the Veep stakes, and I was not part of the early Veep stakes. So there was, I wasn't being considered by the campaign.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
the campaign was aware of me because I had been supportive through a PAC, but I'd never worked with the campaign.
Okay.
So no one on the campaign even had a personal relationship with me because, you have to screen. The campaigns and PACs can't have any overlap. And so my relationship and communication channel was with Tony Lyons at the PAC. And it was really over dinner that we were going through all of the vice presidential options. And it just kind of came up, my partner, Jacob, he's such an incredible friend, and he's very engaged in politics as well. And he cares very deeply about this campaign and what it represents. And he casually mentioned, he was like, well, what about Nicole? And so we're sitting at dinner, and both Cheryl and Bobby spin around in their chairs, and they're looking at me and they're like, would you consider it? and so that was my entry into the Veep stakes. Yeah.
Wow. I'm trying to visualize that whole scene when they both turn and say, would you consider it? And you said?
I said, well, no one's asked me. So you can't consider something you haven't been asked yet. And they responded, well, we're asking you to consider it. And that moment was very surreal because, while I have been around politics and I have been interested in service for a very, very long time. I mean, service is in my bones.
Yeah.
It's just who I am. I've never sought celebrity, but I've always sought service.
Mm-hmm.
And service is always best when it comes from a place that's deeply organic and through interactions and through experience. So I really looked at it as an opportunity of service versus entering politics. And I look at it that way every day when I wake up.
You said consider, though, because they turned and said, will you consider? And I loved your answer, like, well, no one's asked.
Yeah.
But then you considered it. And then what was the time frame between that moment and saying, yes, accepting?
I think all the way up until the moment of the announcement, I was totally open to them subbing somebody else in. So even the morning before I stepped out on stage, I knew the swag had been printed with my name on it. So I was like, this is serious. My name is on the hats.
Yes, that means something.
So this is serious. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And really it was an ongoing discussion of, I want to do what's best for the campaign. I have no ego in this.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to have the right running mate. And, Bobby, he had some time to sit with it. And he came back to me a few days later and he said, you're the one. He was like, I definitely think you're the one. And sent these really incredible, and Amaryllis Kennedy, who's running the campaign, his daughter-in-law, who's a mom of 3, we're similar in age. And she wrote me very, very powerful messages, really from the heart. And she was like, we've all had a chance to talk to you now. The campaign is very enthusiastic. You're just very much aligned with what we believe in here. And this is not a standard group of campaigners. I mean, these are individuals who each come from a different walk of life that have all come together, not to do politics, but to support, what I really think is a movement from one time in American politics to a new chapter of American politics where, we've got to stop spitting hate at each other. We have to be able to see both sides with compassion. We have to be able to have logical conversations couched in deep reason and reasonableness. And we have to lead by example. So it was really powerful to be invited into this campaign in that way.
Yeah. There's obviously so many positives, and especially when you're looking at the whole point, which is to make a difference and to help others and to bring change. There's obviously a downside to really going all in politically as well. I always, whenever I had decisions to make, my dad always taught us, okay, pros and cons list, and figure out what's what and why, and then, okay, whichever one has more weight on it. What were the cons that you considered that maybe made you think twice?
Yeah. It's a really good question. And, the really beautiful thing about the campaign is that it is led by a mother. She has 2 young ones and, well, 3 kids total. She has a teenager and 2 young ones, and she is a force. And she is a force as a mother, and she is a force as a campaign manager. And it was, my biggest consideration early on was not wanting to sacrifice motherhood at all. I won't, I can't. I love my child so much, and I love being a mom so much. And I know so many working moms have this constant nagging that they're just not able to show up the way they want to. And I really juggled with that because I wanted to give the campaign my all, and I want to give my child my all. And so I really struggled with that every day. And it wasn't until I had a conversation with Amaryllis where I was like, look, when, my daughter's father and I recently separated, and so she's half the time with him and half the time with me, and she very much understood my priorities when my daughter's around. And she said, those are sacred days, and you should absolutely always feel encouraged to be at home with her on those days.
Right.
And then when, the weeks that my daughter's with her father, I'm on the road. And hopefully she'll come join me for bits of it. But a child really just wants a childhood. So in those moments, being home with her is so sacred. And then, giving the campaign my all too, I think it's really important that we allow mothers to participate in the political process, because I think if we had more mothers running the world, we would prioritize what matters through government and through government spending. And even in the engagements we have with foreign policy, I think mothers are naturally very good at trying to build bridges and create peace.
And multitasking and all of the sometimes too much, right? And we're trying to do everything for everybody. What is that going to look like? Okay, let's say in November, and certainly the plan is to win.
Yeah.
That changes a lot with your travel and with trying to balance. And I'm in the same position with divorced and 3 kids. And so trying to balance that with the dad's schedule, because you want their involvement certainly just as much. So if you're the vice president of the United States and you're in Washington and on the road or across the world, and then you have a 5-6-year-old daughter.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a juggle. Before I left home the day of the announcement, I was sitting next to my daughter. She was waking up in the morning. It was very early. And I looked at her and I said, hey, Mama's going to go do a thing, right? And you have your best friends here. Like, she has an aide and this young woman who works with her every day. And she has her squad of people that love her and make sure she has a good day. And I was like, you're going to be hanging out with, Emma today, your best friend, and Mommy's got to go. And my daughter is obsessed with Moana. And, the line in Moana is that she has to return the heart of Te Fiti. So I said to her, Echo, Mommy's got to go work hard to help return the heart of Te Fiti. And she looked at me and she just smiled and giggled and said, go. And she doesn't have that many words, she's special needs. So, but she said, go. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go. And then, I was like tearing up, because it was one of these moments where it's like, you realize in moments like these that you are living up to some like mission, right? You are part of something bigger. And that's how I feel about this. That's how I would feel about the presidency. 4 years, we can do a lot of good. And my every expectation is that I will also be able to be a very like aware and engaged mother, because I think what makes great leaders are people who are great parents. Because there's something about parenting that it doesn't allow you to not, to not be present. Yes. You have to be present, because the kids will call you out on it when you're not present. Correct. They know, and they will test you and test you again until you show up as your most authentic self. Yeah. And I think our leadership would benefit from that.
Couple things. I hope you never forget that moment with her, because it's so cool. She's a 5.5-year-old little girl who is not that verbal, right? And she's autistic. And I want to get further into that in a minute, but just to explain what you were saying there and why she doesn't have that many words. But she found a great word at that moment, probably when her mom needed it as you're about to go do something in front of the world. Yeah. It's an amazing moment.
It was an amazing moment. Yeah.
Don't let that one go, for sure.
Yeah, it will be with me.
Ooh, the mom and me is like, oh my gosh. Like, okay, I can tear down walls. I can do anything now, because she said go. Echo said go.
She said go. And I think she understood the storyline. And, Moana has been, we call her, like, just jokingly in our household, like our Lord and Savior Moana, because like she's everywhere. Yes, she's a huge part of my daughter's experience, and she, exemplifies, I think. And I've learned, right? I don't like watch Disney movies, but with my daughter, I've been, I've watched Moana so many times, and it's, it's this idea of really doing something for the greater good. And my daughter just resonated with it from like the age of 2.5. Wow. So like these kids are connecting to something, and I think kids are just so wise. Like, even the children that are going through chronic health issues. I mean, I think of autism as a chronic health disease because, autism, while it's in the DSM-5 as like a behavioral thing, you put that aside, and then you actually look at some of the actual medical issues. But I think for my daughter, like she's already on her hero's journey at such a young age. So it's been, it's been being her mother has been the most powerful thing. It's changed my life. I mean, I was, very comfortable living the life I was living, and through her experience, I've seen everything differently.
Amazing.
It brought me to this moment entirely.
Yes, we're gonna get a little deeper on her and you, if that's okay, in a little bit. I think to go back to the decision to do this and to say yes, here we go, world. At the end of the day, why are you the best possible running mate for RFK Jr.?
I think at a very simplistic spiritual level, I think that, he's been on such a journey. I mean, his journey is so rare, and he's overcome so much to arrive at this moment, which I believe he is destined to arrive to. My journey also has been one in which has had these extraordinary chapters, very defining chapters of trying to find, a way to just understand the world, give back learn as much as possible, and find dignity through very, very challenging moments. Um, I, I think I will make an excellent vice president because I deeply care. And because I've also pushed myself to follow my intuition, which has led me into very challenging moments. I mean, trying to build AI during the AI winter, or, I wanted to go see the world after college, and I didn't have any money, but I saved up a few $1,000s and figured out how to get an internship in China, and then, went on Expedia and figured it out. But I arrived in China by myself as a 22-year-old. And I've sought out every job I've ever had previously by my own means. There wasn't a lot. I came from a low income situation and hard family situation. And so I think, again, I understand America. I understand it really well because I've lived in every single pocket that you could imagine. I've been, standing in line at Safeway with food stamps, and I've been flying all over the world in helicopters and private planes, and, I've been a startup founder building AI all the way to arriving to now running conferences at Stanford Law School and computer science, as a real, leader of this AI movement. I've, seen many religions. I have friends from all over the world. I'm multicultural. I'm mixed. So I think that this is a moment in history where we need leadership that is doing it not from a place of ego, but from a place of experience and from a place of experiencing what it means to be in this new world that we're in. It's a multicultural world right now, and we all have to learn how to get along.
Which is, it seems like it's easier said than done these days. And that's just within the confines of our own country to get along, much less elsewhere. And it's so scary. There's so many levels to this right now, which is why, frankly, I put myself in your shoes just for the point of this conversation, and I'm like, oh my gosh, with what's going on around the world, hell no, I wouldn't want to do this job. This is crazy. This is scary. This is life and death.
It's a tough moment.
Yeah.
We're in a tough moment in this country, but I see so much reason to be optimistic in this moment.
So take me from that, when you're 22 years old and you scrape together enough bucks to get to China to now. By the way, it's only 16 years ago.
Is that right? Yeah, I guess so. I'm 38. I'm turning 39 soon.
Right? Okay, let's go 16. We'll round it up to 17 if that feels better.
Okay, let's round it up to 17.
Okay, yes. But so much has happened in those 16 and a half years to go from this poor kid who just was exploring the world and going back to the country where your mother came from to now being on the grandest of stages. But I mean, people can read all they want, which we have, and many have obviously read about you. But I want to hear it from you, because it wasn't. Maybe they only are familiar with your recent history, right? And the money and all of that stuff. No, there was a struggle. I mean, from 20. I'll get to your childhood, but from 22 on, and all that you've done as an attorney in many different facets to be qualified to even be asked to do this.
Sure.
What's your your quick synopsis of what those years have been like?
Yeah. So my first legal job, I was actually a junior in college in Washington State. I went to a small liberal arts school called University of Puget Sound. And I didn't even get a chance to visit the school because I didn't have money to visit colleges. So when, I see people in my neighborhood and they're like, we're going on college visits. I was like, that must be nice, because I just showed up and moved in and I had no idea where I was going. But, it was, I went there because of two things. One, they had this incredible study abroad program, and I always wanted to travel as a kid. And then the second was they had like a top ranked arboretum, and I love trees.
I love it.
And they gave me a merit scholarship. So,
there you go.
Yeah. and I could, do sports there too and do it all. So my junior year in college, I knew I wanted to go into patent law. I knew I wanted to go into patent law since I was 12 years old. And I didn't know how to get a job at a patent law firm. So then I just went on the internet and wrote letters to every single patent attorney in Seattle. And I said in the letter, I know I have no experience. And I will work for you for free as a paralegal if you train me. And then after 4 months, if you're dissatisfied with my work, I will leave. But if you like my work, I'll work for like $14 an hour, which is way below market for a patent paralegal.
Heck yeah.
But no one responded to me except for one law firm, this tiny boutique patent law office with 2 intellectual property attorneys. And they were running on a pretty shoestring budget, and they were like, let's just give her a shot.
Yeah. We'll use her. She'll help us for a couple months, if nothing else.
Yeah, exactly. And they're, they're like trying to run a lean business, and they're like, this could be great. So then I show up that summer, and I get to work. I get to work, and I loved it. I loved everything about it. And I waited tables at night because I had to make money.
Yep.
But I waited tables at night at this local sushi restaurant. And during the day, I would, at that point, I had finished so many classes. I was pretty much done with my degree my senior year. So then when school started, I would go to school Tuesday, Thursday, and then work Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then the weekends. And they started paying me, and I was so happy. And
Before the 4 months?
I think no, they 4 months.
They made you wait for the $14 an hour. Yes.
Yeah. And then I ended up making more because I was legitimately a fantastic patent paralegal by that point. I learned everything I could about patent law. I absorbed it all. I worked my butt off, and I adored it. And eventually they cleared out a file cabinet and put a desk in there, and in this like file closet, and they were like, you can have your own office. And I was like, oh my God, I get my own office. And it was no windows and, a computer. And then I loved working with the inventors. And I loved understanding this like lattice of innovation across the world and how it all connects, and how, the governments are organized and working in cooperation. And then I started, around this time, this is 2013, following China's meteoric rise geopolitically. And we started to have Chinese patents coming through. And I would pay attention to the law offices that were sending us these Chinese patents to be filed in the United States. And I was like, oh, I would love to go work for one of these places at some point. And it just, I always wanted to go back. I did study abroad in China first, and I had actually already planted a few seeds visiting Chinese intellectual property firms. And it just happened to come together. I mean, just through like luck, prayer, and it just came together. And you just got to sometimes you just have to be scrappy to go from college to like your career. And I just worked really hard to put it all together. And thank God for the internet, because then you can navigate things. So
Sure. But I love that, because you were scrappy. Just to come up with that letter to send to everybody. And you even had parameters within the letter. Like, I'll do this, and then at 4 months you can hire me or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, that says a lot. That says a lot about what's in here, besides the brain. But it's like, oh, no. I don't have an offer, but I'm going to go force this.
Yeah. Well, when you come up from not a lot, you've, like I did, I never assumed anyone would give me anything, because they don't, right?
Correct.
I just wasn't in that kind of community where people were like looking out for each other's kids and their careers. Like, I just didn't have that. I didn't have access to that. So when you don't have access to that, you gotta figure it out.
And so you passed the bar. Like, at what point were you? Because I don't understand your world.
Right.
Full-fledged attorney, and then basically up till now.
Sure. So I loved being a patent paralegal, and then I transitioned into this role called patent specialist,
Okay.
which really is like looking at patents as business assets versus just in a patent office where you're filing the patents to be granted. So I worked at a company that specialized in trading these assets through pools, and we were specifically very strong at telecom patents. So at one point, we had figured out how to pool like a massive percentage of all of these overlapping telecom patent portfolios so that, do you remember the smartphone wars, the smartphone patent wars of like 2008, 2009? Sure. So I was at a company that was trying to ameliorate like that litigation activity through pooling the patents from the different companies together. And so I was a patent specialist there, and I was doing great. Like, I was making good money. I was paying off my student loans. I was living in San Francisco, and I was content. And, like, I was a young woman at that time. I was only 24, 25. But like many young women who are doing well in their careers and they're young, you get into these corporate situations that sometimes are less favorable for young women. Like, and there's, it was an all-male leadership, and you just kind of start feeling not great about things. And I left the company because I just, sometimes there's unfortunate things that happen, in these situations where, I don't want to get into like, too much detail, but I've talked about it already publicly. We don't need to revisit that, but I left and I was devastated. I was devastated because I didn't see a strong woman in my field, or I saw very few strong women in my field, and I didn't know how to go from a 25-year-old in a corporate environment to overcoming the boys' club. And I didn't want to. There's so many sacrifices women have to make to like make it through that, and I couldn't stomach it. So then I ended up selling wine for a little while.
We have not even taken a sip. And congratulations. And wait, selling wine, this isn't yours or anything, is it?
No, I haven't
you don't have your own wine yet?
I was actually terrible at wine sales, but
I doubt that, but fine.
I enjoyed it. I didn't have the same passion for wine as I did patents, but I do have passion for
patents. Wine patents. No offense to your patent life, but I mean, I kind of like the wine. No, go ahead.
The wine is great. I mean, I am a lover of a nice red.
I mean, plus being from that area, you kind of have to like wine a little. But anyway, go ahead.
Yes. So it was during this period that I have this wonderful aunt who's always pushed me. She was an aunt who bought me my first computer ever as a child, and she always was like pushing me to like do the next thing. And one summer she, came and saw me, and she said, "You got to go to law school. Just, keep going.
Yeah.
Don't stop here. Keep going." And I was like, "Okay, I'll go." I always just wanted, my dream was to be self-sufficient, right? My dream was to have a peaceful home as a kid, and my dream was to have a family, and get a chance to be in the law profession and work with patents. But I never was like, I have to be a lawyer, right? I was making good money.
Yeah.
And I was very satisfied and just proud of myself. Because, by that point, I had made it through a lot to even get to that point. And so I decided to go to law school, but also that summer I decided to start a company that would be the AI version of the patent pools of the patent transaction company I was at, which was all manual. And at all of my positions previously, I always loved the dirty work of maintaining records in an orderly fashion and providing reporting systems. I've always loved transactional efficiency. And I've always loved cleaning stuff up, right? And putting it into harmonious processes.
Yes.
So every job I had, I was in charge of this thing called the docketing system, which was our computer-based system of managing all client information and all the government documents, calendaring, deadlines to respond to official government actions, and so I had that was like my baby. Like at every place I had went was the software system, and so I decided to create an automated version of myself because every place I went, they're like, "Oh, Nicole, don't leave. I think we need like more of you here." And after that last job, I kind of was just like, I can't handle the boys club here, but I do love the work. And so that summer before law school, I created Clear Access IP, which was going to be this AI version of the work I was doing for all of these law firms and companies I had worked at over the years. And at that point, I was in my late 26, 27, and started law school, started Clear Access IP, and then was in law school, loved law school, but I mostly was building my company while in the classroom.
That's a lot. No? Is it just natural for you? Because you've been doing so much your whole life to make ends meet, working, waiting tables, all of the above, but creating a company in law school, as we know, not everybody is successful when they focus on that by itself.
Yeah, I started small. I think that's the secret. Start small. Don't expect to build a blockbuster company right off the bat. Build because you love it and you're curious. And so it was, of course, like during finals, I would panic because I hadn't really paid perfect attention in all of my classes because I was building this company. But it was fine. I passed the bar. It was one of the hardest bar exams in California in 2014, but I passed it. And
why was it the hardest? One of the hardest?
It had the lowest passage rate in like a long time.
Wonder why.
It was just they build a different test each year.
Okay.
And it depends on who's writing. So they have a committee state by state of bar examiners, and they write the test each year. And they just happened to write a really hard test my year that, like, I want to say it was like less than 60% passed.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's very stressful passing.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, but I enjoyed it. I look at every challenge as an opportunity. When I joined this campaign, Bobby was like, it has to be fun. If it's not fun for you, don't do it. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna have fun with this. I'm gonna like really enjoy what this opportunity is. And so that's kind of, you gotta, challenge is challenge, but if you enjoy the challenge, it changes the entire dynamic.
Who taught you that?
I think my grandfather, Patrick Shanahan, he was a hiker and actually he was a professional figure skater at one point too.
Wow.
Yeah, as was his wife, my grandmother, Betty. And he was this, he grew up from nothing, from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. One of 9 Irish, living very poor, very, very, very poor. And, he would eat oatmeal or porridge, like multiple meals a day. And, it's that part in American history was very challenging.
Yeah. It's so interesting to me, though, because you have your attitude about making sure it's fun and that you enjoy. That's despite, as you've mentioned, a very difficult upbringing. And gosh, your mom worked so hard to be there for you and for your brother, and your father had addiction problems, and so she was doing it all. I assume he wasn't around much, or was he in and out?
We didn't have money to live in separate homes, even though I think it probably would have been safer. My dad's mental health issues at one point, got quite bad around the time I was 10. And he became a hermit. He never left the house. So then you have, this father who's an alcoholic, manic depressive, very, very challenging mental health issues. And he was always in the house. So, being in the house was hard, often. And my reprieve was always school and sports. And then in the summers, I would, go visit my grandparents who retired in Tahoe, and that was a major reprieve. But home life, day to day, was very, very hard. So keeping positivity in those moments, it's hard to be a child and understand how to love a parent who seems so scary to you, and that you just can't be around. So that was my life all the way until I graduated.
Did you, maybe it's easier to answer now that you're older, but when you were a teenager, when you were a kid, when his issues got bad at age 10, did you love your dad then?
It's interesting because I had to be so focused on getting out of that situation, because my only way out was going to be college, and my only way out was going to be work and earning for myself. So I started working in bussing tables at the age of 12. I think when you're a child in that situation, you are so focused on self-preservation that, it's more about survival than it is about trying to figure out how to love a parent who is really unable to show up for you. I've met so many incredible adults with similar stories over the years, and the fortitude, I think, of people who can fight through the sadness of all of that. It's not a fight, you have to feel it. You can't ignore it. You feel that deep pain, and then you can arrive to a place of safety. And once you can arrive to a place of safety, you can then begin to understand that parent. And then you can begin to forgive that parent. And once you forgive that parent, you feel safe enough to give love to that parent. My father passed away in 2014, and it was really tough, because it's realizing that, they'll never come out of that, because, they've gone now, right? So they'll never come out of that state. Some parents do, right? And for
He never was clean?
He never, he couldn't. Okay. He just, all the way until his final days, he lived pretty much as in this house that he actually grew up in. So it was, but at least he had a home. I see all of these people struggling in America today, and I know who they are. They're people like my father, and they don't have homes. And that, to me, is something that I feel very passionate about in public service, is trying to figure out a way to deeply heal, you know, what's going on with these individuals. And as an adult, I actually learned, I had these realizations about what my dad went through as a child. And I actually think that he had been abused, not by his parents, but I think a neighbor. And, we live in a culture, or that time too was very different. I think it's evolved, but back then, this was a culture of kind of suck it up. You're a boy, you're a young man. And my dad as a child was this handsome, capable young child, blonde, great smile, incredibly athletic, tons of energy. People loved him. He had, girlfriends, and he was loved by his parents. But I do think that, oftentimes when we look at those with serious mental health, there is very, very deep underlying childhood trauma. And there are ways. I have now met incredible healers, like true healers, that can help people overcome that childhood trauma to arrive to a place of a new beginning.
Yeah.
And so I look back now from a place of, safety. I'm now in a place of safety, obviously, but I'm at a place of like really deep, true understanding. And the love that I'm allowing myself to feel for my father is also a love that I really believe we can bring forward in this moment in time when so many people are in need of that specific kind of love.
Yeah. So desperately in need. And I love that you've been able to get to this point. I can't imagine. And when was it that you fully forgave?
There was about 3.5 years ago, I did this meditation retreat where you journal a lot and you're part of this, group of people. It's called the Hoffman process. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Only from you mentioning it in the past.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, but I need more on this, I think.
It's powerful. Some celebrities have done it, but I think, more just everyday people dealing with everyday things that are hard. They go and they do the Hoffman process. And the creator of the Hoffman process believed that the only way to change the world is one person at a time. And you have to heal a person at a time. And so this program was really designed as a way to drop in to your hardest moments.
Yeah.
Those hard moments. Some of them are defining moments, and they're very powerful moments. But then to go into those moments and look around and like deeply understand what was going on around you during that time, and allowing yourself almost this otherworldly connection. I was able to see my father as a child, and it all came together. All of these memories from my childhood started to come together, and I put it all together that he had been abused as a child, and it was very, very clear to me. So, it became clear to me because I could remember all of the things my dad would say when he was in these manic episodes.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I could remember, just little things that like I had ignored for years and years. I could remember them, and I put it all together, and I was like, something bad happened to him. Something really bad happened to him. So it's. I guess I am a public figure now, and I'm talking about these things. These are very personal things. I think that the power of talking about them is that this is not a unique thing to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I've realized is the power of sharing one's story.
It's huge. And to be able to help by doing so, it does take courage to do it. It's interesting. I have I don't know why this came to me as at some point as a parent, and I say it to my kids all the time, my daughters, right? And they're all college age now, but if someone was, the mean girl stuff, hopefully you guys don't have to deal with that down the line with your daughter, but probably it's just how it is. And I would say, okay, it's not nice that they did that, of course. Wonder what's happening in their life right now.
Yeah.
That might, now there's a difference. It's not an excuse for something, because there's no excuse for bad behavior, but it might be a reason. It might be a reason why it's coming out that way, and you just happen to be the target. You happen to be the person in front of them, and they took it out on you. So it takes certainly time, I think, and wisdom and experience and pain and all of those things to get to the point where you can forgive and you can love someone despite all their flaws. But it goes anywhere with family or with the grocery store clerk who was rude to you. There's always a reason, and it's just such an exercise to get to the point where we don't absorb all of it and let it affect not just our mood, but how we live, because that could easily, your experience with your dad could easily have completely ruined your life, potentially. That has happened. So you chose to dive in on this and to face it and to love him. It's kind of awesome.
It's very powerful to arrive at that. And I caution that we don't expect that of everyone, but I do think that if you can get there, it's the most transformative, powerful experience, and it unlocks everything else. It's amazing that when you can reconcile your hardest and most painful pains, everything opens up after that next.
It's just the commitment to start it, right? It's almost like, because we all run from a lot, but if you go dive in and face it, this can come of it. That's beautiful. Listen, I know you mentioned this a minute ago, and I don't want you to go deep with it, but I wanted to thank you for, in the past, being open about the sexual assault that you experienced at work, while you were working. I don't know the specific details. Again, that's pretty scary to share, and so vulnerable. But I know you know this. By doing it, it's incomprehensible how many people it helps when you decide to open up.
The Me Too movement early on was, and I think we can talk just more broadly about these movements, but it was a very powerful movement. Women hadn't felt like they could do that before then.
Right.
It turned into something, as many movements do, but I think that we have to look at the good side of it. And I can only talk about things personally.
Sure.
And I think that there is power in sharing those stories. I think we're in a moment in time where, it would be very beneficial to have a forum for sharing those stories without it having to be branded with a movement. Does that make sense?
Yep.
I think that so many of these movements get co-opted. And so to talk about it in this forum, I think is helpful, because I think we can turn it into not a mission of a movement of immediate, like, we don't have to turn this into a giant commercial movement, right? I think that there's a gentleness and a form for recognizing it, what it is. And, certainly we have in the United States a very strong judicial system. And in a time where social movements have become so politicized, I think that there's also a danger of not allowing what are real things to be co-opted by politics.
Right. It's hard.
And you have done an amazing job, by the way.
I don't know about that, but
I really think so, Sage. I mean, when I first watched you talk about your experiences and the big, really big decisions you made to exercise your rights, and to not make it, it was politicized.
It was.
But that didn't come from you.
Thank you for saying that. Never. I just think there's so much more to us than what we believe politically.
Yes.
And it's about the experience and having not even, having empathy for everyone's experience, even if it's something that you can't fully identify with. But knowing that when we do take stands, share, no matter what it is, that's when we realize it is so much bigger than us.
Yeah.
All of these things. Yes, it's our experience at that moment, but then when you do share, it's so cool to realize you're not alone. Sometimes I wish I were alone, and I certainly with sensitive topics like assault, etc. You don't wish it on anybody. But since since we are unfortunately not alone, what are we going to do with that then? Do you just hide in it, or do you say, okay, maybe if I say something, this young girl or this employee cannot feel silenced, cannot feel afraid.
Yes. And that's why those individual stories, focusing on the individual, finding the nuance around that effort, and not, turning it into some political statement, which then gets, oftentimes co-opted by like a political party. It dehumanizes what is really what is something that really deserves care and thoughtfulness, and an opportunity for other people to feel heard and seen. It takes it away from the individual, I think, when it becomes politicized.
It does. Yes. And then there's distrust with it. I mean, well, listen, I'm in California right now. I look at Black Lives Matter, and initially I think the intent from what we all were being sold was, okay, there's some things going on that aren't right, and let's stand up and help, and then look. And it turns out that it's nothing that we thought it was. We're hoping it was, right? Because I think the vast majority of people and Americans want to be helpful to everybody and actually are very inclusive, But if we see something wrong going on, I'll help here. I'll help here. But wait, what's tied to that? And then you go, well, forget it when it's co-opted. And then you're afraid to trust to give. So those are the things you guys need to fix, right? And I'm kidding, but I know that that's one of your whys, is to get in there and get your hands dirty, and to say, okay, this meant well. Here's how you can make it better.
Here's how you actually do it. And it doesn't come, it comes from structurally getting in there. And I know many good community organizations that were co-opted by BLM and turned into, well, but that's BLM. And when, they weren't. They were really good criminal justice community organizations. And, BLM started so well, but I think what happens, again, with these movements is that they've come from a great place of good intent, and they are so powerful because they have the whole world looking. But then you have all of these other actors around the movement. You have the media, you have politicians, right? You have these other forces that I don't even really understand, right? And they're looking at how to use the energy in this movement and direct it for their own purposes and their own gains.
Yes.
And that's when we get nowhere good.
Exactly.
We go backwards. And we hurt all of the other organizations that are doing the grassroots community work of care first and restorative justice, and talking, like going into the prison system and trying to make sure that there's fairness and cases are being expedited properly and giving fair, and that people actually have access to justice, which is an entire layer of professionals that are organized in various ways that all have operational inefficiencies. So like, if we focus on actually the infrastructure and not the movement, we are going to move together forward. We're not going to move in vitriol forward.
Yes.
And so again, BLM I think started off very good, but its own growth and its own success I think kind of backfired on itself.
So they had the wrong people in charge of it who were out for themselves, and that's been proven with the mansions and all the ugliness that came along with it, which is so unfortunate because, to your point, usually that's the minority. The majority of the people involved in any of these groups have a good heart and want to do the right thing. Sadly, then, that's all you hear about, and that's rightfully so. I mean, when there's no way to trace where the dollars went to help good, and then it ends up being the boy who cried wolf, and then, well, is this really racism or is it not? And then the trust is gone. It's all about the infrastructure with the right people.
Yeah.
Where there's accountability, and that comes from leadership.
And also, all of the organizations in the criminal justice reform effort, a lot of them are really, really excellent. And I don't want to lose that energy. And so I've never turned my back on that group of people. And I continue to support this group of people. And, BLM had made so much money. I mean, I never funded them directly, but then I started looking at some of the budgets and I was like,
crazy.
That was a lot of money. But I have seen them give to some good projects. So I can't say that BLM is all bad. And I think that, from a perspective of, this is an organization that, became very powerful very quickly.
Fast.
Very quickly. And got a lot of, good faith donors that really believed in the vision. I think, again, when you have these external forces around them, you get behavior that doesn't realize that it's not in and of itself carrying the criminal justice reform movement, but you get behavior that can't see everything else because they're so balkanized around
and then you have,
what they're doing.
unfortunately, those who know exactly what they're doing. And again, it's not just BLM. It's through corporate America in many ways, right?
Exactly.
But it's everywhere. But I think when you have a Breonna Taylor or some of those, the very public cases, who then, this is the perfect person to help me be. And again, that's an example of, the reason I bring that up is because the family then came out and said, where was Black Lives Matter? They weren't there to help us. So when you have the most publicized cases with the opportunity to help them and they say, where were you? That's when you're done, frankly. And then you wonder why people don't trust. And this is what the job is. One of a million jobs that you will have, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To try to, yes, fix infrastructures, but man, if that trust isn't there by the average person, then I'm like, I love what you're saying, but your track record kind of sucks, and I don't want to give money to you.
Yeah. And again, I think in terms of all of the organizations out there,
corporate America,
and corporate America,
the worst.
is has a lot going on that. Whew, I mean, Bobby is taking charge with that in a way that is so refreshing and is so bold. I mean, he's taking on every single major industry that has captured all of our biggest agencies. And the power in these groups is enormous. And he's taking them all on in one campaign. It's not like he's just taking on one. He's taking them all on.
Yes. Yes. And we talked about that. And on day one, I would go to the CIA and the NIH, and I'd go down the road and Big Pharma, and then we're going to close the border, and we're going to, that's a lot. I'm like, well, you're going to have a very busy day one then. And we're all waiting to see, because that's the thing. No matter what, no matter who's been in office for the last several decades, frankly, it feels like, there's a reason why these decision makers are allowed to get away with it, because it's been, no one's been held accountable for so long on any level, and now it's a free for all. And now look, so that trust factor, right? Because we can go through every issue, all of us can. But at the end of the day, I don't even necessarily need to like a candidate or whoever's in charge, whether it's my boss or the president.
Mhm.
But I need to have a little trust and trust
Yeah.
that they have not mine, but our best interests at heart. And that's where it feels like in my lifetime, and I'm 51, it's never felt more divided and
Yeah.
with any less trust. I mean, I don't know a time where there's been less trust.
Yeah. I'm
So you're crazy for coming in at this time. Wow,
you
Nicole.
know, I always have viewed great challenge as great opportunity because all of the best things come from overcoming the most challenging moments. Which means that if we are successful with this,
Oh.
what's on the other end is going to be amazing.
What a victory
Yeah.
that would be. So, since you're from Northern California, specifically from Oakland, right?
Mhm.
Okay, from Bay Area. I spent so much time up there.
Really?
From 14 to 19 during the Golden State Warriors run. I mean, they were in the finals every year, and I'm like,
Oh, I
Warriors,
know.
because I love the Bay Area.
Yeah. You know,
It's-
when I was a kid growing up, they couldn't give away tickets
I know.
for free.
You guys were terrible.
They were so bad when I was a kid. And so watching them as like an adult, like be like the golden, like the actual Golden State Warriors
Yes.
winning all these championships and incredibly well funded, I was like, my hometown has changed. Like,
Things have evolved.
Things have evolved.
Yes. But
yeah.
I don't like going there now.
To Oakland?
Oakland has always been different, and I liked staying there.
Well, all of our teams left.
I know.
They all got pulled out. I mean,
they got pulled out, but were
Yeah.
they being and were they being supported as well? And then when they're bad, then the fans don't come. Well, why would they come if the product's not good? Well, the product's not good because they don't have the money. Well, what
Yeah.
the domino effect of all that. But the bigger picture to me is that one of the most stunning, awesome, best cities, best restaurants
Mhm.
in the country, if not world, doesn't look anything like it did to me when I was there a decade ago. Every year.
Well, so Oakland is shifting a lot right now.
Mhm. So I'm including all of it with San Francisco.
Oh, San Francisco.
Sorry,
Look, the pandemic crushed cities like Oakland. It's not just Oakland. Chicago crushed.
Oh,
New York crushed. LA crushed. The lockdown was one of the most devastating events in American history. And it was devastating for the most vulnerable communities. The border, too, has also contributed to putting so much stress on these communities that have not recovered from the lockdown. Over $4 trillion of wage worker income was gouged from these communities. The kids who were already just getting by, whose only warm meal a day was at school,
exactly.
couldn't go to school. So when people, want to blame the crime rate in these cities on like a DA, I'm like, come on. The crime rate was due to the fact that the lockdown decimated every aspect of getting by for these communities.
Mhm.
These communities, which already were suffering from health crises, they were impacted 2 to 3 times harder by the pandemic than other neighborhoods. And it's because of environmental factors, right? If you think about what supports immune function, clean water,
Mhm.
food, good food, homes,
Yes.
right? With clean air, no mold, open spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And then not lack of crushing stress, right? That's what you need for immune function, like successful immune function. So you have a lockdown coming in, you have a new virus coming through, you have communities that are barely getting by on all of these essentials. And then you take away wage earner income and then you open the border and you let millions,
It's a free for all.
millions of people come over the border and aren't being turned away because they can't, these executive orders allow individuals to stay. They're processed very quickly. I went to the border. That was my first stop after taking this position because I really wanted to understand it.
Yeah.
I wanted to see it. I wanted to understand it. I wanted to understand all of the figures. I wanted to understand every law that was impacting these decisions being made. I wanted to understand where people were going and how they were getting there.
Mm-hmm.
And, there is no excuse for this. I mean, once you understand the dynamics, it looks intentional. And
it is,
in
my opinion.
Right.
There's no other explanation for it because it could have stopped immediately. And then instead, Biden has just continued to let them flood in. And I think we all know the reasons why. But in the meantime, I'm so upset because I'm okay, you're okay, but how about the majority of Americans, or at least
our most
many
vulnerable
millions
communities are the ones impacted.
Yes, completely.
And so, I really I'm trying to look at this as objectively as possible. I'm not looking at this through a political lens. I wanted to just understand fully the dynamics of it, especially on the crime rate, because that I've been working on for 9 years, and it's something I understand very, very well is the criminal justice system. So seeing these numbers in these cities didn't make sense to me. They didn't look like I often think in data, and I think in terms of modeling things through this lens of econometrics. And the two most impactful things on the crime rate by far are the lockdowning, lack of recovery from the lockdown, and the simultaneous influx of the migrant populations into these communities specifically. Those are the two greatest factors to our crime rate. So if we close the border and if we, work on Bobby's plan to ameliorate the pressure on these communities, we give these communities a freaking break.
Yeah.
Right? They can take a breath. They're not competing for, these jobs and positions because some of these migrants are working. They are taking jobs.
Sure.
So we don't have a economic policy addressing the realities of what's going on in these communities. Closing the border is the most reasonable thing we can act on today. So I hope if, Mayorkas hears this, from somebody who's working in criminal justice reform, please close the border now. It's really, really important.
It's essential, and it's heartbreaking because of the domino effect of it. I think there's several layers here.
Yeah.
And the cities that you mentioned that we all know of that were decimated the most by the lockdowns, all had similar rules and regulations regarding COVID and the rules around the pandemic and the lockdown. And I remember, again, from a distance, because it was my favorite city, I'm like, wait, Gavin Newsom, what are we doing? What are we doing? And was follow the science, and then it was not follow the science, and it was picking and choosing. And so San Francisco, we'll just focus on that, was decimated. But it was, to an extent, self-inflicted when it continued well beyond the scary part of maybe let's just say the first 9 months of COVID. I don't know the exact date, right? From there, and again, the videos are disturbing isn't even the right word. I just saw a video today that came out with Congressman Adam Schiff up in the Bay Area, and he got robbed, and he went to his event with a t-shirt on because they stole his bags out of his car. I mean, it's every day in many of these cities, in New York City, in San Francisco. And my question is, okay, yes, the numbers that you spoke about and with immigration and all these people filtering in, and a lack of accountability for the criminals. And when they're allowed to come in and just take a bag and let's just swipe it all in and steal. And when the toothpaste is now even locked up at a CVS, and CVS's and Walgreens and Nordstrom's and Bloomingdale's are all leaving town. Why, I guess is my question, and I mean this genuinely. Why is there so little accountability for these criminals who are no longer fearful? It is broad daylight, and it's
broad daylight,
constant. And now the businesses are like, peace out, San Francisco. We can't do this.
I think there's a general trend towards broad daylight, criminality. And we see it from all levels of society. I mean, let's be honest, right? So we see it at, the corporate, and the government levels, and we see it on the ground. I can speak from what I see, because, I'm in these communities. I work with community organizers. There has not been a program to help these communities get past the pandemic. And I know that I keep going back to that lockdown. We can definitely talk about accountability, but you have to understand that you put somebody who has committed petty theft in prison. They don't have money to actually afford good legal representation. So then the state then has to appoint legal representation. And that becomes a very expensive proposition if that person ends up becoming incarcerated, because of a pileup of offenses. That individual is then going to cost $75,000 to $100,000 a year to live in our criminal justice, in our carceral system. Taxpayers are paying for that. So if you remember Aristotle, and I know this is not a popular thing to continue to bring up, but Aristotle did say, the father of all crime is poverty. I didn't make that up. And it's been something that's been repeated throughout history as governments like ours, as civilizations like ours have endured high crime spikes. I believe in my bones that there are mechanisms to address poverty that impact crime rates. The number one things we have to look at are, for one, we've got to take illegal migrants out of because anytime you have illegal migrants within that calculation, it distorts the entire analysis. So if we take that, this is a big burden. I think that this is something that is not a bipartisan thing and we can all agree on. Yeah. We really have to take the pressure of the migrant population
but then again,
out of these communities.
You stop it today, you shut it down, but then they're already here. You're not going to, how does that change immediately in San Francisco, in the Bay Area, in New York?
Right. We do have to go through a process of if you're in this country illegally, you have to go, right? Our communities just cannot support them right this moment. And you do it with the promise of apply for immigration. You have to do it hand in hand.
Legally, just like everyone else.
Legally, like everybody else. But you have to do them together. Otherwise, it comes off very heartless. And
but what's more heartless to me is the fact that we're ignoring our tax-paying citizens within our country already, and those children, and from the medical care. So that's more heartless because at least they're here legally.
Right.
So we can't. I'm not even concerned about that anymore, just because
it's reckless and it's heartless, and it is breaking the social contract to our citizens.
Correct.
And we cannot keep breaking that social contract because once you break that social contract, guess what? All of the other ones start to fall apart as well.
Right.
And so this is a fundamental social contract of what it means to be a citizen. This is why it's such a big issue. And I very, 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 very firmly believe that this is a social contract that we uphold through strong borders and through deportation in tandem with immigration programs. So we have to figure out how to humanely deport these individuals with packages that say, apply for immigration. Here are locations in the world where you qualify to work today. You can't work here, right? You are not legal to work here, but here are other locations that you can work.
So you're saying that's what's happening with Eric Adams in New York City, where they're giving people money to stay and then
these are perverse incentives. This is insanity.
It's total insanity. And so we know that can't continue. But what also can't continue is, like, the reason why those criminals are so bold in many of these cities is because they now know, especially since the pandemic, that they will not be held accountable. So
No.
there's no room in the
And
system,
they won't
and
be
it costs.
deported, and
They won't be deported.
Yeah.
So the only way we
It's-
crack down on that is by saying, okay, now we are going to we're going to hold you accountable. There will be repercussions. Store owners, you can defend yourselves. I don't know what that looks like, but there's no other way to. Why would they stop now? Because we say pretty please? Like,
No, we need to enforce. We need to enforce deportation. We do need to enforce
law enforcement.
Law
like that.
enforcement. Yeah. So, and again, like, this is a lot of pressure to put on the law enforcement right now as well. And I think,
So much pressure.
it's so much pressure to put on our law enforcement. And most of these theft crimes are nonviolent. The gross majority of them are nonviolent. If as I look at this, I look at it in terms of, we got to fix the migrant population. Number one.
Is that the biggest issue for you right now as you come into this?
Yes.
Immigration, the border, yeah.
Yes, because I believe that we need to do it from a place of recognizing we are protecting our social contract here in the United States. And I believe we do it in tandem with diplomacy, and we do it in tandem with immigration policy, right? We can't, otherwise you do these sweeping programs and it's you can do it better. And we are a smart country, and we are a humane country, and we can do it very well. It's happening in the UK. The Prime Minister just announced, they're going to engage in that process. And here in the United States, it's time. We've got it's beyond time. It should have never gotten to this.
And it got political, and it got politicized, and even with the wall, and now there's been some, okay, maybe Trump wasn't all wrong with that, and we don't want to acknowledge. I don't care who says it. There needs to be some rules and regulations.
I was at the border. Mayorkas put up walls too, and the wall that they put up is a fence next to the wall.
Because we didn't want to use Trump's materials.
And Trump's materials were sitting right there.
So again, spending, not concerned about the American people.
Yeah, and much more focus on this erratic, ridiculous, opposition between the parties, that a wall should not be in opposition if we all agree on the wall. And clearly, the Biden administration believed we needed a wall.
Now it's going back up, but they didn't want to do it because it was Trump. And I think all people care about is, okay, are we safe as a nation? And right now, I feel like we're as vulnerable as we've been, again, in my lifetime. Are we safe? Can we afford to buy not just food, but healthy food? And obviously, there's a lot of work to be done in all communities with that. Can we afford what about the economy? Look at the gas prices. Look at the interest rates. Like, everything right now. And it feels like
war is not good for gas prices. That's for sure.
Kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Yes, all of this.
We're in 2 proxy wars right now. And it's costing us a fortune.
And I asked Bobby about this. I mean, it is costing us a fortune, and we cannot afford, literally or figuratively, to let it continue. So, Israel-Palestine. I mean, we know there's atrocities throughout on both sides. However, what should the priority be do you fix it? How do you fix it? How do you help that situation? And unfortunately, it's very political in America with how we have chosen to deal with it or not deal with it. What would the priority of the Kennedy-Shanahan White House be?
I'm a millennial. So when I see war, my instinct, and you have to remember, I in high school protested the war in Iraq because I knew that was the beginning of a lot more. Because once you go overseas and you engage in another nation, it's not something that ends lightly. It's something that is very expensive and drags on, and it did, and it creates new enemies. So I have been watching this since I was a young person in high school and analyzing the Middle East and Middle Eastern affairs. I believe that, regardless of whether or not, and you have to realize, like, I actually converted to Judaism as well. So, but who I think of when I think of the issues in the Middle East? I think of Golda Meir.
Hmm.
Golda Meir was an incredible leader of Israel. And she was a leader of Israel at a time where U.S. relationships with Israel were very different. The relationship with Israel during her time of leadership was very much, you're on your own.
Mm-hmm.
Know that we are allies, know that we respect and acknowledge the state of Israel. But, Kissinger famously met with Golda Meir during the Yom Kippur War, and it was very clear that Kissinger realized his duty was as an American first and as a Jewish man second.
Mm.
And that was his job. And I look at where we are right now, and it's devastating. It's that October 7th was devastating. The cruelty and the hatred between cultures is devastating, and it doesn't have to be that way. We know that Muslims and Jews can get along. I have friends on both sides. I have friends that, are very much pro-Palestinian and pro-Palestine and very hard on the state of Israel. And then I have friends that are Israelis. And, I think that we're in a time in history where I think we really need to figure out who we are as Americans in this moment and recognize the fact that when we fund other governments and their militaries, we have a great responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
So we are very much responsible for what is going on, and we are responsible for the deaths happening in Ukraine right now. We are responsible for what's going on in Gaza. I think that, I was very troubled to see Netanyahu, decrying what is going on in our college campuses right now, because this is a different country. Israel is a different country. We are allies, but Israel is a different country. And Israel has a responsibility right now to figure out how to end this war in Gaza. Our responsibility is to Americans. And
But hasn't that ship sailed? Because of, like you said, the involvement that our hands are already in it?
I believe that the support of the Iron Dome was good and gracious. And I think when we started funding the Iron Dome in Israel, it was a sign of partnership and goodwill and allyship. And it actually is a practical way of not getting involved in proxy wars in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
Like, here is tools for you to protect yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And let's assume it's one of the most sophisticated systems in the world, which it is. That should be enough to not engage in alteration in the region. Within, immediately after October 7th, I saw Israel going into Gaza into war with Hamas. I was very worried. It was the same feeling I felt when the U.S. went into Iraq. And it was the sense of beginning something that was not going to be easy to end. We are all responsible for that, because the United States has funded mostly the budget goes into the Iron Dome, but starting a war with Hamas right now is not just starting a war with Hamas. It is It is engaging in something in the Middle East that was not very well planned.
At the same time, you try to, okay, whether it is Israel in response to October 7th, or even if you go back to 9/11, and certainly hindsight's 2020, and even in that moment there were questions, but when you are attacked the way that Israel was,
Yes.
the way that the United States was on September 11th,
Yes.
2001, there must be something done.
Absolutely.
And so what's that line? I don't know.
Yeah, I think hostage rescue operations,
No, but
special forces.
But what about the retaliation and the if when you allow attacks, allow meaning okay, please don't do that again. Like that's kind, so
No, you don't allow anyone across your border ever again. I mean, that's I mean, what Israel has to do going forward is ensure its borders are secure. And I think that historically they have had incredibly strong borders. Golda Meir wrapped up the Yom Kippur War in about a month. I mean, it was one of the most impressive, remarkable feats in modern history of war. She coordinated with her military, and they didn't have half the intelligence capacity that we have today, that Israel has today, and they ended that in a month. And that was because they didn't cross the border.
Right.
They stayed within their border.
I just think there's got to be a fine line, and it's I don't know what the heck it is. I'm not in that space, but when you are attacked, it is fair to in some way, shape, or form. I say it to my kids. My kid used to be bullied. Now he's 20 years old. He's 6'4". He's fine. But sometimes the only way to stop it is to punch back. And
yes.
And what is that?
I'm
just saying I don't blame them. I don't blame.
I think that Israel has every right to defend itself. And my concern is that when you go from an event that is so devastating as a terrorist attack on the scale of October 7th, that was a terrorist attack.
It was.
And then engaging in a war within the next few weeks after that moment. I study the philosophy of war through Sun Tzu, who wrote The Art of War.
Okay.
One of the most famous military generals in human history. And if you look at the philosophy of war and the success of war and the success of even these moral wars, which is what Israel is engaged in, it's in a moral war right now. It was attacked in a way that is deserving of a response. But to win that war, you need to, according to the art of war, you need to shore up your resources. You can't act too quickly.
It had been years. I mean, there's the history between the two, though. It's not like it was just October 7th.
Yeah, but I think that if you look at how the U.S. is responding, Chuck Schumer, everyone was very supportive on October 8th.
Yeah.
And everyone was very supportive of October 20th. And people were still very supportive by the end of the year. But now look what's happened.
Yeah.
You have the Democratic Party all of a sudden turning its back on Israel because of how stuck the situation seems right now. And I think everyone is very eager, including Israel, to put an end to this war. And this is a situation, again, that you have a leader like Netanyahu out in front. And when I see him on the news denouncing what's going on our college campuses and not focusing on the ceasefire and not focusing on, the military tactic and the focus of what this next chapter looks like, because we all need to be focused on what this next chapter looks like. We all need to be focused on what reconciliation looks like in this moment. It can't continue as is. And I firmly believe that, beyond looking at a ceasefire, we need to look at what our role is as Americans in Middle Eastern peace negotiations. There is strong leadership in the Middle East. what the UAE has accomplished, what Dubai has accomplished. It's this utopian city. It's much nicer than most of our American cities.
Yeah, it is.
And
So sad. It's crazy to say that.
And you look at what they've accomplished culturally, right? Because they had to accomplish something culturally before they came to accomplish what they did economically. And culturally, if you look how the UAE responded after the attack, there was incredible sympathy from a, country very different than Israel, but they had so much empathy for Israel.
Yeah.
In Hanukkah, there was a menorah lighting in the UAE. This is an example of what peace looks like in the Middle East.
It is doable. I mean, when you mentioned Netanyahu and the college campuses, yes, sure, fair. We can say, okay, focus on this. I think maybe it's so shocking, maybe to Netanyahu, to all of us, because it's not just about protesting. That's part of what we are allowed to do. People fought so we could, peacefully protest. Two things stand out. Number one, the lack of education, at least knowledge of the full situation, is what it seems like from so much of if you go in deep and watch all the videos and listen to what some of these kids are saying on these college campuses, they actually don't even know the facts. They've acknowledged many of them, like not fully.
Well, and we're finding out some are paid protesters too. I mean, let's.
Well, but that goes back just like what was happening after the pandemic and in some of these big cities and Antifa, and we know that it's quite similar with people being paid and
very
it's
similar to what happened. It's again a movement being co-opted.
The co-opt way,
by these outside forces, and there are good actors in there, but they don't realize that they're surrounded by this massive group of individuals that are taking advantage of this movement for their own gain. And so, but again, going back to the heart of the matter.
Can I say real quick that what I was saying, the other thing that stood out to me, because yes, probably paid just like Antifa, it's all disgusting. It's one thing to protest, it's another thing to do it with the hatred and vitriol and threats towards the Jewish people. And that is what I'd like your opinion on, because we all know it's wrong, great. We're all in agreement with that, those of us who are sane.
Yeah.
Now you have Columbia University completely shutting down classes for the rest of the semester because of it. And it's another level. The hatred. If we reverse this, someone said this recently, if we reverse it and they said, kill all the blacks, kill all the gays, this would not be tolerated.
It would not be tolerated.
Why is it tolerated? Because they're saying, get rid of the Jews.
Because our executive office, not just our executive office, but we have leadership in this country that does not understand the difference, or they understand the difference and they are turning a blind eye, and I believe because of votes.
Yes.
And that is fundamentally the issue. I was just chatting with somebody who is campaigning for Biden, and I'm like, look, I don't think you should be as worried about Trump as you should be to the party selling out to pro-Hamas groups for votes. There's a difference between saying and being concerned about the Palestinian plight and supporting protests that are being co-opted by pro-Hamas groups. Big difference. And do not, in this moment, pander to anyone around pro-Hamas groups for votes to beat Trump because you're afraid of Trump. I mean, come on. This is insanity. This is absolute insanity. And these supporters of Biden recognize that. And they were like, I get it.
But then they do nothing about it. There's no, I think it would be so wonderful, again, regardless of party, to just say, I don't care, this is wrong. We are better. But that is what a true leader would do. And we've been lacking leadership just in this instance from the beginning.
I mean, look at how the media is covering it too. You have these massively armed guards, physically going up against these protesters, many of which again, like, who is making up these protesting groups? Like, there are good actors, but then there also are not good actors. And you have this, conflation of interest altogether. And you have this media moment, this media spotlight moment, and you're losing the point entirely. The point entirely is that we as a country cannot support that kind of hate towards a minority group ever. And
It doesn't matter who it is.
it doesn't matter who it is.
Yeah.
We cannot be out protesting for the death of other nations. We cannot be out protesting for the death of our fellow Americans.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we cannot be yelling at them in our college hallways and preventing them from entering spaces.
It would never be tolerated against any other group. It wouldn't be.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart with you're Jewish.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not even, it's inexcusable, but again, I go back to kind of in the crime question, and it's like, no, we've enabled it. We've allowed it to get to this point. And it's, as a parent, you know what I mean? I look at it and it's like, okay, if you allow your kid to,
I think we need to show them what pro-peace protesting looks like. If everyone was out protesting for peace, right? Like, real true peace. Like, that's the kind of protest that is what makes America great, is the anti-war protest.
But they know it. They're not that stupid. They know, everybody knows what a peaceful protest looks like. This is intentional to go to this level. And I think that's the part that is incomprehensible to me. And as a mother of college students, there are certain places where, first of all, I didn't have to say it to my kids.
Yeah.
They were like, yeah, I don't want to go here or there or this area or this region. I did a story recently on how so many of the application process, the numbers of kids who are going to the South now, where, by the way, these are public-run universities, and it's still quite liberal with the way that they are run. But there's none of these crazy demonstrations. There's no hate on many of these campuses. And so the Ivy Leagues, even the elite universities, are losing. Their application numbers are way down.
Yeah.
So the domino effect that this is having, maybe that's the way, since there's no other way to hold people accountable, is to say, okay, now I'm not going to let
donors are pulling out.
Yes, and that's where it started to happen a year ago when you look at Harvard and Penn, and when the big billionaires say, you know what, maybe I won't give you my money, then there's some accountability. Then the Harvard president finally resigns or is fired, but that was plagiarism, not for accountability for this. Anyway, okay, 2 more topics I want to get your thoughts on before we wrap up, because I'm sorry, I could talk to you for days.
Same.
I feel like I have so much to talk to. This is an issue that will always be an issue forever and ever, no matter who's running for president or vice president. Abortion. And I need to know where you stand on that very difficult, sensitive issue.
It's a very sensitive issue. So I've been working in the field of women's reproductive health for a while now. I'm actually one of the largest funders. So I started something called the Women's Reproductive Longevity and Equality Center. And there's 2. There's one here and there's one in Singapore. By here, it's in Northern California. I believe that women's reproductive health and choices and experiences have and will always be topics of discussion and topics of debate, because it is the most powerful thing in the world. I mean, bringing new life into the world, as a woman, is like the most remarkable, magical, powerful. There's no greater force.
It's an honor. It's the biggest honor.
It is an honor. There is no greater force on this planet than the force of creating life. And I was seeing, and again, like, we can talk about abortion in a minute, but I first want to talk about women's reproductive health more generally, because I think it's really important to look at where it is today, right? Before we get into the politics of abortion, I want to talk about where women's reproductive health is today, which is not in a good state. If you look at the numbers, the number of women who want to get pregnant and have a baby and cannot
Yes.
is higher than it has ever been in this country. The number of women suffering from miscarriages, the number of women who are giving birth to kids that then develop chronic illness, it's astronomical. It is a national security issue, in my opinion. It is a moral issue.
How is it a national security issue?
When you have a shrinking population,
Okay.
and that population has so many sick kids
Okay.
who cannot work,
Mm-hmm.
who are going to need assistance
Okay.
for their life, and we are going to have to put in government dollars. I mean, just, some of these chronic diseases are going to amount to adding, 5 to 10 trillions of dollars to our national healthcare budget in the next 20 years if we do not stop this chronic health issue. It's already one of our largest budget items, $4.6 trillion a year in government spending in healthcare. We cannot sustain as a country on this course. So what I have noticed is that the issue of fertility in general has had a ton of corporate involvement. I've been criticized for being anti-IVF. That couldn't be further from the truth. I'm critical of IVF because it was designed out of cancer research dollars, and I learned through my own experience that the funding into women's reproductive health virtually doesn't exist. So how do you keep a healthy woman healthy longer? How do you look at ovarian function through a scientific lens, foundational sciences? Never really been funded. Mm-hmm. So this idea of women's reproductive longevity, health, and equality, I'm like the first funder in the space. I created the field. So, and it had been so neglected. And as a result, you have these very savvy private equity owned IVF clinics coming in and saying, this is an amazing opportunity.
Yes.
Right? This is $15,000 a cycle, cash, right? All cash. It is one of the fastest growing industries in the world today.
Industry. That's the key word there too.
It's an industry.
Yeah. Business.
And so anytime I look at an issue, I look at it as where the money is going, how it got there, and what is actually being neglected.
Right.
And so that's how I look at all issues of women's reproductive health, including, this issue of abortion. And abortion when I was a little girl growing up was about choice and freedom and female empowerment. And it still represents that to many, many Americans, the right to choose when you become a mother. But you have to also understand that this is before the age of apps, like cycle tracking apps. Like we have so many now tools to track which days we're likely to get pregnant. We have so many tools for birth control. And then I look at the issue of abortion and I'm like, it has been completely politicized. It was politicized by Trump to win an election. And then it was politicized by Biden now to win an election back, or, through abortion. So you have this incredibly politicized environment about women's, pro-life or pro-choice. And the reality is we're talking about women in almost the abstract. And so when I come in as a woman, as a mother, and I'm looking at the fact that we have men talking about this as campaign platforms, and then I look at the reality on the ground, I think to myself, okay, what are let's go back to the fundamentals of pro-choice. If there's an accidental pregnancy and you're a teenager and you're terrified, and you need support, you absolutely should have support. That support should provide guidance on what's going on in your body, support socially. If you want to have the baby, support economically. Angela Stanton King has been involved in Bobby's campaign, and she's a pro-lifer. And she has put together these wonderful resources for women in the community who want to have the baby, because those resources don't exist from the government. And so then you look at the abortion clinics, many of which are in low-income neighborhoods, and we're investing in those at a far higher rate than we're investing in ending the cycle of poverty in those neighborhoods. And you clearly see there's an issue here. And so when I think about pro-choice, I think about it as objectively as possible as a woman, understanding what those moments are like. And we have to meet women where they are rather than politicizing them and turning it into campaign talking points.
Sure. I mean, but your numbers, like in New York City last year, there were more Black babies aborted than born.
That is horrible.
And unfortunately, and then you know this, but not everybody knows the history of even Planned Parenthood and Margaret Sanger, and on record saying that she wanted to have less brown babies and Black babies around. I mean, like the root of Planned Parenthood, which happens to be the biggest, arguably, I don't know, agency where people think to go if they want to terminate, which they do other women's reproductive care and health care things there, but unfortunately because of their stance and how they've chosen to handle abortion, how it was created, how that company was created, the hatred behind it is what honestly people like me really, really struggle with. And at the end of the day, it's interesting, the political side of it, because you have one side that says, okay, do what you want up until birth and maybe even after. Do whatever you want. And then you have the pro-life side that says never, never, never. I believe Nikki Haley said on the floor at the Milwaukee, that first Republican debate, maybe it was the second one, but when she said, listen, we have to find somewhere in the middle, because the conservative side is never going to agree with full on go for it, kill everybody. And of course vice versa, where we say there's no abortion. And so what is that middle ground? To me though, I spoke to Bobby about this, and at the end of the day, he says, yes, this is a woman's choice, period. And I said, even up till birth? And yes was his answer. And so to me, it's like, it's always a woman's choice. It's always a woman's choice, even up to.
This is why I think women need to be having this conversation.
Women are, but we are. And that's why you're a vice presidential candidate. But so far, listen, whether it's Biden, Trump, who's been in office before, obviously women are considered and part of these discussions. However, it's too late. It's already political. So what do we do to try to find that middle ground? Because neither side is going to agree to the opposite extreme. So how do we come into the middle? Because I'm not voting for anybody who says go for it up till birth.
No,
I won't do that.
No. And that is not Bobby's position as I understand it. My understanding with Bobby's position is that every abortion is a tragedy.
Yes,
is a loss of life. My understanding is that he absolutely believes in limits on abortion, and we've talked about this. I do not think. I don't know where that came from.
He just very clearly said, because I pushed, and I'm like, wait, up till, he said, it should always be a woman's choice, always, even up until that moment. And that is where anyone who says that, well, you're going to lose a lot of people, because that full term option is something that is just scary.
Well, here's my understanding on his position. That is not my understanding of his position, and I think maybe there was a miscommunication there. But I think what he's saying is that it should always feel like a woman's choice.
Yes, sure.
To the final moment, right? Because if you're forcing a woman to have a baby, that is a very painful situation for that woman to be in. What you need to do is create an environment in which that woman realizes this is a beautiful opportunity to become a mom and to welcome a new life into this world, and that it is the most sacred, wonderful thing. And the only way you're going to get there is if we stop terrifying women because they're feeling like they're unable to step into that role of motherhood, or because they're fearful of giving birth. Because I mean, I remember I was terrified. that moment leading up to having my daughter is
Yeah.
like so scary.
Crazy.
So when you put in these resources that make you realize this is like one of the most spiritual, beautiful experiences you're ever going to have in life, and you look around your healthcare and you're like, I trust you to bring this. I trust you to keep me alive as I go through this tantamount experience. And this is going to be full of beauty, and you are supported as a mother. I think that's what Bobby means. I think Bobby means, it should always feel like you're moving into this moment on your own accord. And that's the kind of society I think we all want to live in. That you're moving into this moment.
And the mental, it's the mental health aspect overall in general, where when there's education and when it's done, like here are your options, and there's no information being held back, and there's no pushing one way or another. Yes. And I do, and at the end of the day, listen, this is why this issue will never go away. And then when do we consider the baby? And I'm not necessarily asking you that at this moment. I'm just saying it is.
And the science is changing around that all of the time. And I always thought about it in terms of viability. And that is becoming earlier and earlier. So the science changes as our medical industry changes. And I think at the end of the day, we always have to remember that this birth and childbirth needs to be something that we only project love and power and care into.
Yeah.
And
I agree in the viability thing. Hey, it's good. That means that we have made medical advances to, wow, when a baby's born at 24 weeks, God forbid, the science has evolved to the point that we can give this baby a chance and this mother and father a chance to have, and so that's beautiful that the science has evolved. I look at the viability, certainly, I mean, and it's still low chances if they're born that early of survival and of not having, major issues. But I know you.
And a chance to thrive. I think viability and a chance to thrive are both very important to look at side by side.
With the science involved in that.
Because I don't think, especially as we look at, the advances in technology, like we want to define what a chance to thrive looks like. I mean, we don't want to bring through babies that are going to live a life on life support, right? So, like, there's this very important opportunity to thrive analysis, and we have to be very,
That's sensitive, the word thrive, because what about people who, when everything is rooted in their faith?
Just from a health standpoint,
but even some people with their faith and certain beliefs and their faith in God, and that it will be taken care of as it should be. So that thrive word is touchy as well, because it depends on your belief system. I'll never forget this, and I know that you'll, as a mother who's had a baby, I'll never forget the very first time I went for a sonogram, 6 weeks. And so the baby approximately was the size of a piece of rice, right? But on that sonogram, I saw the 4 beating chambers of the heart. And I grew up Catholic, and regardless of that, I've always been pro-life, with an understanding and a very, the constant conversation is how I'll put it today. That moment when I saw that and heard the heart beating, at just 6 weeks pregnant, obviously not close to viable.
Feeling.
Correct. And so one of my issues that isn't even the question for you, it's just, okay, we sometimes are more concerned about the wildflowers in the median than what is they're alive, right? That plant behind you is alive. That's alive in me. And no one can deny that that's alive. Does it mean it can thrive today? Thrive outside the womb? Of course not. So I just, my one, what I beg of for everyone is, yes, to stop politicizing, but to never forget that this is a live being inside of us pretty much immediately. From there, we can debate all day, but I know what I saw, and you know what you saw when we're able to see that. And I think sometimes
Yeah.
we just become immune to that part of it, and we want to just focus on rules and rights, and it's like, that matters.
I mean, how great would it be, Sage, if it were women leading this for other women versus legislatures?
But I as a
right?
woman shouldn't, like, my opinion is different from yours probably, so I don't want
but
to
I
say.
think if you and I came together to help a young woman through this, we would figure out how to do it really well. In spite of all of these legislative things, we would come together and we would help a woman going through what is a crisis come to a decision that she feels really good about for the rest of her life. And I believe that if given the resources, almost 10 times out of 10, she does end up choosing to have that baby. Because she's got you looking after her, and you've got her back and I've got her back, right? That's where this discussion needs to go.
And that's to your point about what you've helped create and the right environment for them to at least be armed with all of the knowledge and
Support.
in particular the therapists, because there is so much documentation and research into the women who have had abortions and how for the rest of their lives. Like, I don't know that that's talked about enough either, where yes, this is your right, and just know what could, not necessarily, but what could come with this for the rest of your life. It's so interesting because I have a lot of friends who've made very different decisions. One in particular has had 2 abortions, and I love her with my heart. It doesn't affect my friendship with her.
Yeah.
I would never, but I love her, and I've tried not to judge,
Yeah.
It's so funny though. It's like so many people have struggled. Do I do this? Do I follow through? I don't know. One, you never, ever, ever regret having that baby. And then there's a lot of times you regret ending it. And I think that those are just conversations that I hope through things that you're doing and what you've already invested millions into, just to really fairly give women the full conversation and not just what this group or this group wants
we
them
gotta give
to
them the
hear.
full conversation.
We
Yes.
don't. And that's what breaks my heart.
Me too.
Okay.
Me
Your daughter,
too.
your little girl is, first of all, the story we began with, Mommy Go, on the day that you were going onto that stage. It got me choked up because of, I know that she's your why. I know that she's your everything. And she's also taught you so much in so many ways, right? With her autism. And again, by you sharing it and being an advocate for it, millions of people out there are like, again, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
How can your experience help others as you take this step? And, the goal is to help lead this country. Your experiences, how can that help others? And the way that our system deals.
Learning how to show up for my daughter has made me a better person in every way. I talk to other autism moms, and some of which have multiple kids, and the way they talk about their affected child is different. They're like, the other ones taught me how to be a parent, but my child with the autism diagnosis taught me how to really love. And it is, when you have a child who is struggling, like a lot of these kids do, it breaks you when they're like really, really struggling. Some of these kids really, really struggle. As a parent, you feel so helpless, and you feel like everything inside of you would give anything to just get them healthy and get them through these incredibly challenging moments. And autism as a word I find very unhelpful.
Yeah.
It is the diagnosis describing the behaviors of something else, right? And if you look at medically what these kids are dealing with, they're dealing with chronic GI issues. They're dealing with chronic inflammation, sometimes neural inflammation. Apraxia, which impacts their ability to speech. Motor skills. When I say motor skills, they have motor challenges. They have serious sensory integration issues. And and then some kids have other things too. Of classic autism, those are the medical challenges these kids are dealing with. And the behaviors, which is what we call autism, really stem from the fact that these kids are really struggling with a host of medical conditions. And when I realized that, it changed my entire perspective, because after an autism diagnosis, typically the first intervention you get is a behavioral intervention, either speech or ABA. And they're trying to figure out how to engage with the child behaviorally. But up until today, there's one company now that views it as also a series of underlying medical conditions. That company is called Cortica, founded by two doctors. And, when you realize that you are having to split your role as a parent into two roles, one, working with the behaviors, and two, working with the underlying medical condition, it's incredibly empowering. And so what brought me to really choosing politics and policy and working with Bobby is that, once you understand that these are two paths that parents are having to do concurrently for their child, you can then understand the healthcare needs, and then you can then understand culturally how to frame a society around this growing population of individuals. It is actually, believe it or not, it still remains an unpopular opinion that autism is actually a medical condition, a series of medical conditions, if you can believe it. Yeah.
What?
Most of the money that goes into autism is for behavioral support. So ABA, speech therapy, and within that, there's OT and PT, which is like, how do you work with the gross motor skills and just teach these kids through repetition, how to function. The medical side of autism has been sorely underfunded. And, when you ask people, well, what's causing these medical conditions? That's when you run into these really weird situations in which you're now seeing holes in the scientific literature, and you're being kind of, I don't want to throw around the word gaslit, but you are kind of like, don't question too much. Nobody knows what the causes of these medical conditions. But if you take each one of them independently, which is what I did, and you do these deep dives into the science of like, what causes such serious GI dysfunction? What causes chronic neural inflammation? What causes, the part of the brain that is responsible for sensory regulation to dysregulate so frequently? Once you go into each of those, you start getting answers. And I am of the belief that there has been systemic censorship into going into each of those pockets of science. I've met the scientists. I can't tell you, Sage, how many conversations I've had with scientists who have said, you really can't associate my name with this because I will, be discredited. But these are prolific scientists. These are prolific scientists that have and run, large autism clinics, and that are trying to figure out how to medically treat autism, a lot of times through functional medicine. But they're also publishing. They're researchers. So they're running research facilities and clinics as well, and they're publishing, but they're also treating. And so these are individuals that are really, they know what's going on. And so I've had the opportunity to speak with some of these whose names I will not name because I was asked not to. And I believe very deeply that this is embroiled in a much larger issue we have in this country around free speech, around accountability, around corporate capture of our agencies. And it is worth every effort to fight to for the sake of the sanctity of life, right? In this country, we have for this country, right? Free speech is so fundamental, and free speech amongst our scientific community is so precious, and we cannot continue to sacrifice it. I mean, we saw it. We're seeing it. We're living it after COVID. But when you realize that, like, it's impacted how we can address chronic health amongst our children, that's when, as a mom, I'm a pretty calm person, but that's when my knuckles get white.
That's when they need to.
Yeah.
That's when we have to. And I think that's the sadness that so many of us had over how the pandemic was handled and the vaccines and the mandates, et cetera, were handled, because there's so much trust. We're told to trust the science, trust the doctors, trust everybody.
Trust the experts.
Yeah, and then the doctors weren't even honest. Some intentionally, some for fear, with which you're describing, and I understand.
And then others that wanted to be honest were losing their licenses.
Yes, that's the fear. So you understand why they are, but in the meantime, it's one thing if I'm holding back and not giving all the statistics on an NFL game. It's another thing if I'm a doctor and not giving all the facts and allowing me as a mother to make the best decision for my child. Because also the child that's already born, but how about the one that's not born yet, and what we're putting into our bodies that we're trusting?
We have to remember a lot of the doctors who are on the front lines were being gaslit themselves too and threatened.
Right.
So,
and look at the domino effect of that. I mean, this is millions and millions and millions, billions potentially of people whose lives are changed because there wasn't enough science to determine all of the effects. And what does that do? And I have a dear friend who, Allison Williams, she left ESPN because she was having trouble getting pregnant, and her doctor, through all the IVF, said, don't take the shot. This is 2021. Don't do it. And she told them a medical exemption is what she wanted because Disney was requiring. And she gave them the medical, and they said, no, you have to get it anyway. So then it's also religious for her. And so she did that, and they said, no, they denied. So she was fired when she's just trying to protect her body, her hopeful baby, because there wasn't enough science with it. And I think that's one example. And she had the strength to walk away and not take it, and eventually was able to get pregnant and have a second child after years of devastation, right? When we lose our trust in medicine and the scientists, even if it's understandable because they're being gaslit and threatened and fired, then we have nothing, because this wasn't just about me. This is about me and my babies, right? And it comes down to that human element, not just what our jobs are. So then you lose me. And how do you get that back? How do you get moms like us and fathers to trust again?
I think we're all waiting for an apology.
We're gonna die waiting.
I believe that look.
I love that you said that, though, Nicole. The apology, that would actually matter to me. Make a difference.
It would make a huge difference to so many Americans. Oh my God. Acknowledgement. Look, we are sorry. We made a mistake and it hurt you. Do you know how powerful that would be? It would restore so much order in this country.
Right. But it won't happen. I don't believe if it hasn't happened yet, when we know so much more, when Fauci's been exposed 100,000 times.
And he continues to receive award after award and get invite after invite. I'm releasing a podcast in a few days, and one of the things I talk about in it is like this society of individuals that it's power and control at all costs. And they feed each other, and they're working off these leverage partnerships. They have so much invested leverage in this small community of people that they continue to get away with it because they all kind of support each other until one falls out.
Yes.
And I, I never knew Fauci. I wasn't involved in Event 201. Quite frankly, I was so embedded in mainstream media because I wasn't on social media. I didn't even know what Event 201 was until recently. But like, just, socially, like, being around, like, these groups of individuals that are supposed to be doing philanthropy, and then you realize that they're kind of engaged in something else is again, an issue of trust and an issue of like, what the hell do you think you are doing to everybody? And how are you qualifying any of this as being okay? And the gain of function work, like, who authorized that? Like, what the goodness gracious is going on here? And and so
we need trust. We need to believe again. And I know that's why you've taken this leap. It's really in every aspect of it.
Yeah.
Whether it's the medical, the science side, trust that someone's going to take care of that border and protect us again, make the right decisions overall for our national security and the economy. Because like I said, you and I are fine, but what about those who aren't, who are paycheck to paycheck?
Which
it's
the majority
reality
of Americans.
Yes, and we need that back. And by the way, if I always say when, because that's the plan, right?
Yeah.
When you win in November, if that happens, you'll be the youngest vice president in history.
So second youngest.
I did the homework. Who's youngest?
This guy in the 1800s.
Did he win or did he run? Because I thought running, but winning, that he would be. So somebody a little younger ran, but then winning, I thought you'd be the youngest.
Okay, let's double
At 39,
fact check that
did you be 39 when you take office?
I can say with great confidence that relative to lifespan, I will be the youngest.
That I can say with that sure. A baby, which is amazing. So, what do you want? America, to know about this incredibly accomplished, brilliant mom who just cares.
I will be a great vice president because I deeply care. I will be a great vice president because I have already healed past some hard moments in life, and I know what it takes to heal and reconcile through hardship. And we're a country in deep hardship. And I will do everything I can with the greatest integrity to bring heart and reconciliation to the forefront of our executive office.
You really are the definition, I think, of the American dream, to literally come from nothing with poverty. And your beautiful mother who has fought through so much and is by your side, and your father in that story, and then for money to never, ever be an issue again for the rest of your life and for your daughter's life. And what a blessing. But you know all of it, and not many people can say that. It's special.
Thank you.
Thank you for sitting here with me for so long and trusting me. And for the conversation. I'm a huge fan of yours. It means a lot. Thank you.
And I've been following your journey too. I'm so excited for your chapter, your current chapter.
I am too. It's day to day. I still talk in like athlete sports metaphors. I'm day to day. I'm questionable. I'm probable. It depends on the day. No, I'm so grateful for all of it and just the opportunity to literally. This was my dream as a kid, and I was able to do it on the sports level with all the best athletes. But like to have true conversations with difference makers and people that can inspire me, inspire all of us, and people who like to drink red wine and wear fuzzy socks.
Yes, and wear fuzzy socks. I actually have a pair almost identical to this, so I am a fan.
Well, thank you, and enjoy every moment.
Oh, I really appreciate that, Sage. Thanks for having me.